Welcome back to my Pluribus series. In this week's video, we find out what Carol saw at the end of last episode, which some of you guessed correctly in the comments of the last video. The meaning of this episode's title, HDP, is revealed through a very surprising cameo. Carol attempts to share a dark truth with a fellow survivor, which does not go the way she was expecting at all. New revelations about how the others will turn the 12 remaining survivors are revealed. We also catch up with our guy in Paraguay who decides to change tactics after learning some new information. And as always, I'll share insights from the official Pluribus podcast throughout about this week's episode. Subscribe so you don't miss next week's Pluribus videos and my upcoming TV and film reviews. Full spoilers ahead as I recap, break down, and review Pluribus Episode 6, HDP. Roll the intro. Now, let's begin. We open on a building which at first glance I thought was the storage unit that Paraguay guy was in, but we see Carol rushing out and we realise this is Agrijet where she was at the end of the last episode. She runs outside and she's trying not to throw up. It seems things have thankfully picked up directly after the last episode ended, which I'm glad about, as part of me was convinced that we'd have a whole self-contained episode with Paraguay guy to see what he'd been up to, and that would delay the reveal of what Carol saw at the end of episode 5, but that's not the case. So we'll get to that now, as Carol grabs her camcorder and goes back inside Agrijet to record and reveal her discovery not only to us, the audience, but to record it for her fellow survivors. We then have a brief found footage-esque style sequence in which we see the camcorder's point of view as Carol records it. The official Pluribus podcast reveals that this was an idea that the director of this episode came up with during prep, and she was able to guide Ray Seahorn, who plays Carol in the show, to get what was needed. But the amateur filming nature of this really just adds to the atmosphere of this scene. So we follow Carol as she goes back inside the refrigerator warehouse at the end of the last episode, and I think pretty much everyone expected, including many of you in the comments, revealed that she saw human remains, body parts, shrink-wrapped for prosperity and cut up into pieces where they could be put into a grinder the size of a bus, as Carol puts it, and yes, turned into, quote, milk. So that's one mystery solved, and I can't help but feel that was a bit predictable, but what happens next and what the reaction is to this revelation certainly wasn't. Carol gets ready to send the video card as usual to distribute it to the other survivors. She hesitates though after retrieving a pink envelope and instead packs up her things and leaves the house. She's worried that this time the others will not send out this particular video, given its contents. We then cut to the title sequence. We then open to an extremely lavish, opulent party. We follow some drinks through an entire scene, weaving in and out of all the various guests, dressed very extravagantly in 1960s regalia and outfits. And this is done as a very impressive one before we finally arrive at a card table, where some high-stakes poker is being played. This all felt very James Bond at this point, which turned out to be very relevant as we are reunited to Mr. Diabate, dressed in a white tux and flanked by two beautiful women. At the other end, of course, is an older gentleman dressed in black, wearing an eye patch. The villain. As the following scene plays out, the music even has a Bond twang to it, and the official Pluribus podcast reveals that this was, of course, all very deliberate. The 1960s stylings, the James Bond theme, people dressed as various icons, including Audrey Hepburn, James Dean, and Elvis, just to name a few, as this is all part of Mr. D, yes, I'm going to call him that from now on, Mr. D's fantasy. He is role-playing as James Bond, a suave, sophisticated man undeterred by playing high-stakes poker and going all in for $5 million. Speaking of, a scene plays out which is very reminiscent of Casino Royale. Both Mr. D and the gentleman wearing the eye patch go all in. They both have a strong hand, but naturally Mr. D wins it in the end. Everyone erupts into applause as Mr. D wins, including the eye patch wearing villain who actually starts clapping. Breaks the spell of this roleplay scene. Mr. D says, no, stay in the scene. The eye patch guy then storms off and tells him his luck will run out soon. Mr. D replies, but not today. He then starts to walk away with the two women, but asks the crowd, anyone else? The attractive model who is dealing the cards also comes to join him, as does a few other women. We see two men behind the eye patch guy raise their hands as well, but Mr. D replies, next time, and they lower their hands. With that, he makes his exit and says, it's been a pleasure, as they all raise their glasses and cheer. As soon as he's left, though, there's a deafening silence as they start clearing up the floor and picking up glass with their bare hands and clearing up the mess this giant party has made. We then zoom out and it's revealed that we are in Las Vegas at the Westgate Hotel, formerly the Hilton Hotel. The next morning, while surrounded by naked women in a hot tub from the night before, Mr. D is informed he has a visitor. They say, we have to go. You can come with us if you like. But he says, no, sooner or later, we'll have to talk. Meaning that the others know that Carol is on her way. Carol arrives in her police car into a vacant Vegas. She has no idea if Mr. D is here. She's just hoping that he is. Please be here, she mutters to herself. The official Pluribus podcast reveals that this vacant Vegas was quite a challenge to achieve. Yes, they were actually able to film in Vegas, but Vegas, even late at night, is never truly vacant. They had to capture multiple images using an array of cameras, essentially near 360 cameras, to capture the environment, which was then stitched later on with visual effects. In fact, Carol's entire driving scene, she's not actually driving, they're simply LED panels displaying images of the Las Vegas Strip she would have been driving down. Carol then arrives at a giant screen for the Westgate Hotel that flashes "Welcome Carol." A snippet of this scene was one of the many mysterious teasers released before the show premiered. Now we can see it in its proper context. We see her on the casino floor and other screens inside inform her where to go. Again, it is completely vacant. The hotel room that Mr. D is staying in naturally is on the 300th floor and is an incredibly opulent suite. In fact, it was the same one that Elvis stayed at, something Mr. D expressed an interest in all the way back in episode 2. Mr. D calls her inside and offers her a drink, which she declines. She says, "You're going to want something stronger than champagne when you see what I brought." Mr. D asks, "Is this another one of your videos?" Carol's surprised. "You've seen my videos?" "Of course. They are well done. Very dramatic." Carol is temporarily caught off guard and she's like, "Well, you could have let me know." "Never mind." She says, "Well, this one is disturbing and I know it's a cliche, but you're going to want to sit down." Mr. D then flatly replies, "Is this about them eating people?" Carol's like, "What?" Mr. D says, "It is troubling. How did you..." He says, "Allow me." And he plays a video on the TV. And John Cena appears, which I was not expecting at all. But he's here to explain to us and Carol HDP. In this video, which is shot hilariously like an infomercial and complete with slideshow graphics and naff stock footage, he explains that the others cannot kill, not even plants. So they can't even harvest wheat, but they can collect windfall, like when an apple falls off a tree. They can't pick it themselves, and animals that need milking. But with 7 billion people, that's a lot of mouths to feed, and there is a calorific deficit due to their decision not to kill. To make up for it, he explains, we've had to take certain measures. I think you can guess where this is going. He holds up a milk carton and says, 1/2 pint contains 300 calories. And what's in it exactly? Well, he explains it's made all around the world and the ingredients vary depending on the local region. It's mostly stockpiled food that's in danger of spoiling, and each carton contains 8 to 12% of, you've guessed it, HDP, human-derived protein. John Cena explains, or the man formerly known as John Cena, that hundreds of people pass away every day, and those human remains who would otherwise go to waste are our source of HDP. We cherish the memory of these people and appreciate their sacrifice. This is so creepy and weird, and there's something very disturbing about essentially cannibalism being described in just such a cold, cool, calculated, measured, and flat way. He continues, would we choose to consume HDP given other choices? No. History and most cultures, though not all, have taken a dim view of this. And honestly, we're not keen on it ourselves, but we're left with little choices. Rest assured, Carol, you will never have to consume HDP unless you want to, and we assume you don't. Only the freshest windfall and stockpile foods will be provided to you. We hope that clears things up. As always, your well-being is of the utmost importance to us. Call anytime with comments or concerns and leave a voicemail. We regret not being there in person, but for the time being, we need our space. It's brilliant. It's really funny, really disturbing, strikes that very unique tone that I think only this show has. And that's something the director agrees with, as described in the official Pluribus podcast. She explains there's a very specific tone to the show that feels very fresh. You can't simply explain it to people. And I've found this when I've tried to tell other people about why they should watch it, because I've been enjoying it so much and I want to know what other people think. And you can't simply do the Hollywood thing of it's like this crossed with this, because it's really not like anything I can think of anyway. So it's then revealed that Mr. D has known about this for a week, about the others consuming humans. He said while he was hanging out with John Cena, he asked why he was drinking so much milk, and John Cena was happy to explain. Mr. D also says none of us are happy about it. Carol then says, "Who is us?" Mr. D reluctantly explains the others, the 11 survivors. The guy in Paraguay, though, has not communicated despite their best efforts to send a chaperone. They meet every Tuesday and Friday, mainly over Zoom. Cal's like, "Well, what do you talk about? I'm guessing it's not saving the world because you've shot that down real quick." Mr. D explains, "Well, in a way, we're trying to figure out a way to stop the others from starving. Something the others didn't explain is that within 10 years, the majority of them will starve due to their lifestyle choices." They said himself and the other survivors came up with the idea of using robot farming, but that's unfortunately not an option, as the others would have to program and build them, and they just haven't got the time or resources to do that. But they were grateful for their input. Carol asks, "Did you consider including me in this? Like, I'm a really good writer. I could come up with things like robots all day." Mr. D explains a vote was taken not to include Carol. It wasn't unanimous, but it was felt her presence would be disruptive, and it's hard to disagree with him there. I'm not sure she would be aligned with everyone's goals, let's say. Mr. D explains it's not personal. It's not about you. It's not about us. It's just how it is. Carol says she understands, but asks to go to the bathroom. We then see she is rather distraught and is holding back tears as she tries to get herself together. As she enters the bathroom, there's a large, what looks like a painting of Mr. D sliding his sunglasses down suggestively. And there are a few of these pieces of so-called art dotted around the suite that we see in later scenes. I think it's clear this guy might have a bit of an ego. The official Pluribus podcast reveals that the actor who plays Mr. D, his first day was technically a photo shoot in which they put him in all these kinds of ridiculous outfits, including dressed as Elvis, and those were then turned into giant posters and paintings that were dotted around the entire suite. So it's quite funny looking out for those during this episode. We then see Mr. D is on the phone to the others, but we only hear his side. He says, "But she is so lonely." "I understand. I miss you too, my loves." So it's not clear what they were talking about, but obviously something to do with Carol. Maybe who's trying to plead their case or trying to convince them to move back into Albuquerque. We see Carol has passed out on one of the sofas and Mr. D puts a blanket over her, which again demonstrates he seems like a very sincere and perhaps honest guy. Yes, some of his actions and his treatment of the women seem a little sleazy, but again, there seems to be a naivety, an innocence, a carefree attitude that nevertheless endears you to him despite that. Cal wakes up to Mr. D making breakfast for them both. There's a funny moment where he attempts to eat the breakfast in the same way as her by stacking it all on a bit of toast and cramming it into his mouth. Mr. D asks Carol what her plans are for the day, and Carol says, "Well, I'm sure you need a break from me." She says, "I'll get settled into a suite, freshen up, and then let's meet up later to talk some more." Mr. D's face drops. He does not have a very good poker face in this situation, and it's very obvious that is not what he wanted to hear at all. The idea of, I think, being alone with Carol for any more amount of time, as he said he misses his loves, is not something he wants. Carol observes this reaction and after an uncomfortable silence says, "I'm just messing with you," and they both laugh. But it's clear that in this uncomfortable silence, I think Carol did want to stay. She did want to talk with him more and discuss possible solutions. She doesn't actually want to leave yet, but when she sees how obviously put off Mr. D is by the idea of her sticking around, she bottles it and she says she wants to leave. They both laugh in the end and she explains, I need to leave. This whole city is like $1 trillion ashtray." And Mr. D replies, "I'm sure it's no Albuquerque." Mr. D encourages Carol to stay in touch, to check in. "Maybe you can help us to figure out a way for them not to starve, to save them." Carol replies, "Tell them to pick a fucking apple." And she says, "I didn't mean that." "Fuck it, I did." She says, "The best way to help these lunatics is to turn them back to how they were. Do you really think everything is better now just because there's peace? Help me reverse this. They have a choice. They're doing this to themselves." Mr. D explains they don't see it that way, and perhaps implies he doesn't see it that way either. Cal responds, "Well, we'll all be starving with them when they turn us. Did you think of that?" Mr. D says they can only turn us with our consent. Cal says, "What?" Mr. D explains they have to tailor the cure to them personally using their stem cells. And the only way they can get the stem cells is from an invasive procedure to the hip, which they can only do if granted permission and consent. He says they only found out yesterday, and he assures her they are not happy about it. They even asked Mr. D, "Do you want to join us?" And he said, "Regrettably, at this time, no, I will not join them." I mean, why would he? He's getting everything he wants and more. Why would he possibly have any reason to stop this fantasy now? And initially, on hearing this, I thought perhaps Mr. D was lying to Carol to put her off the scent, to maybe give the others some time to find an alternative solution. They could have perhaps told Mr. D what to say, even though they can't lie themselves, and they could have calculated how she would react to that particular lie. But given Vince Gilligan's comments on the official Pluribus podcast this week about Mr. D being a straight shooter and sincere, I think that might be unlikely, but who knows? This show's going in all kinds of crazy directions. But Carol does the smart thing upon hearing this and calls the other right then and there to verify. We, of course, hear that now well-known voicemail. Carol calls and leaves a message saying, "Is this true? Do you need stem cells in order to cure me?" Mr. D then motions outside where on the side of another massive building is a giant screen and it says, "This is true on both counts, Carol." Carol looks relieved, like a huge weight has been lifted from her shoulders. And who can blame her? I mean, she's been desperately trying to figure out how to reverse this. More importantly, not get turned herself. So the fact that one of those things is potentially off the table and not something she needs to worry about anymore is, I imagine, quite a revelation. She calls back, and I have to say, I love the fact that they play the full voicemail every time. I'm saying, "Our feelings for you haven't changed, Carol, but we need some space." She says, "I do not consent. Don't lay a finger on me. Repeat this back to me." She then looks outside again, and after a few moments of waiting, it says, "You do not consent. We will not take any stem cells from you. We will respect your wishes." And with that, Carol heads out and goes to her car. There's a quick exchange about Mr. D saying, "This is your car?" And she's like, "Yeah." It's a police car, of course. So he's like, "Okay, interesting choice." She says the same back to him. He has a rows of Lamborghinis, all with on their number plate a particular day of the week. Clearly, he's a Lamborghini kind of guy. But before Carol leaves, Mr. D leans into the window and says, "The world misses you, Carol. Zosia misses you. The others want to come back. They're just looking for a change of heart." She looks at him blankly and says, "Fuck them. Watch your toes." And she drives off with haste. And yeah, I think this was a great exchange between these two characters. Clearly, they have very different views on what is happening in the world and what is happening with the others. But it's interesting that Mr. D's almost become a spokesperson for the other survivors and that no one seems to be on Carol's side. But there is someone who might be in the not too distant future as we cut to a timer that starts at 12 days, 12 hours, which then goes all the way back in time to 9 days, 18 hours. And we are reintroduced to Paraguay Guy, who's in the same office we last saw him in when he received a not-so-constructive phone call from Carol. And at this point, presumably, he is rather low on food and supplies. He's continuing to write down frequencies in his notebook, and he's setting a timer for a few minutes every time just to see if he can hear anything on the frequencies. This notebook is full of every frequency he's listened to so far, and as he crosses another one out, he looks at an entry in his notebook that doesn't have a line through it and instead has a question mark. It is 9.613. He turns his radio to that frequency and listens. And this is what it sounds like. Some sort of weird drum beat for a phaser. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but he instead puts another question mark next to this frequency instead of putting a line through it. He then hears a noise outside and it's a car pulling up to deliver food again. As before, he goes outside to knock the food over through the gate, but he sees there's also a package from Carol Sturker. Intrigued, he opens it up and sees it is a VHS, which is a videotape for all of you not old enough like me to remember them, like a large cassette from the days before DVDs, Blu-rays, or even streaming. He goes back inside and he puts the VHS inside a television, and it's the first video that Carol recorded from the last episode. "Greetings, my fellow 12 survivors." He's taken aback. He says, 12? And as we saw before, it's her explaining that there is a way to reverse this and that the others essentially revealed that to her. And she also discovered that they can't lie. As this video plays, there's hopeful, optimistic music playing, and it sounds almost like a rally cry. The Paraguay guy, he's tearing up as he's watching this video. This is probably the only thing that's given him any hope in the almost 10 days since the joining happened. He's been completely alone and isolated and afraid and has had no idea what's going on. With this, he seems to have a renewed sense of purpose and he leaves, and he puts Carol's address that's been cut out from the envelope inside his notebook. He heads outside the compound with a tire iron, which is presumably the first time, again, in 9 days that he's done this, and it's night. The streets are empty and the lights are off. As he's walking down a street, they suddenly turn on, which causes him to jump and turn around, which is one of the shots we see in the trailer. He then lightly jogs to his destination, which I assume is his house, but it's never properly confirmed. I was trying to have a look at some of the photos on the wall, but they were too unclear as, again, it's night and he's not switching on all the lights in his house. As he opens the front door, he announces, "If anyone is here, leave now." Once he hears only silence in response, he goes to the kitchen and starts putting food and items into a bin liner, or trash bag for my American friends, and he raids the fridge and gives some satisfying sighs as he eats some old leftovers. Probably the best thing he's eaten in a while. It certainly beats licking old cans, I imagine, or dog food. He then grabs some other supplies, notably including some maps and some hidden keys. He then uses those keys in the garage, where he takes a sheet off and reveals a yellow vintage convertible, the very car seen in the trailer. He then puts a rucksack and the bin bag from earlier into the car and a fuel can. He begins to drive away, but the engine stalls. He gets out frustrated and starts turning the wheel towards the downward slope to the right, when all of a sudden, "Hello, son," says a voice from the darkness, and there's a figure completely in silhouette, standing and talking to him. This figure then steps out of the darkness and she says, "You must be hungry and confused. Can we do anything for you, son?" He replies, "Don't call me son. You're not my mother. My mother's a bitch." He then gets in the car, drives off into the night, and he heads off on a mission and a journey that heavily suggests he is off to find Carol. And that is the end of episode 6, HDP. And for me, this was another great episode. I'm really pleased with the pacing of the show, actually, which is something I've seen a lot of people online complaining about. To be honest, I'm very satisfied with how quickly the plot's actually moving forward. There's lots of things introduced that are then immediately addressed, and the plot is moved forward and progressed in quite significant ways, I'd say. Sure, it's not big on action, but it's very significant character moments and character growth and world building, to be honest. Honestly, I think if you're bored by the show, you just don't have a very good attention span. But maybe I'm being a bit harsh. I'm totally into the premise, and I really like sci-fi shows like this. Although, as said earlier, there's really nothing quite like this show, and that's what's great. I can't predict what's going to happen next, although I did partially predict the HDP thing being human-derived protein, but as many of you in the comments said in the last video, you also came to that same conclusion. And yes, it may be a little obvious in hindsight, but I really enjoyed what they did with that reveal once it was made. The fact it became a bit of a non-reveal. Carol, and we were obviously shocked to discover this, but when she tells Mr. D and travels personally to tell him, out of fear that the others would not distribute the video as they had done her previous ones, she finds that he already knew, and yeah, he's troubled by it, but he's not going to do anything about it. And in fact, there's a whole infomercial presented by the man formerly known as John Cena, which was yet another delightful cameo. Speaking of delightful cameos, something I forgot to mention earlier, according to the official Pluribus Podcast, Vince Gilligan made his first cameo in this episode, which he has never done in any of his previous shows, including X-Files, Breaking Bad, and Better Call Saul. He is, in fact, the head that Carol films in the Agri-Jet warehouse freezer and shows to the camera. Their prop maker for the show apparently 3D scanned Vince Gilligan's head and then 3D printed it, and that's what they used in the scene. So there you go. Somewhere around in their production office is the head of Vince Gilligan. And yeah, as I've said before, I don't know where the show is going to go, but I am along for the ride. So what questions do you have at the end of this episode? I'm certainly looking forward to Paraguay guy and Carol meeting up. I'm interested to see what the others do going forwards. It seems they're becoming more of a background element at this point, as they're not directly interacting with Carol as much as they were in the earlier episodes. I suppose at some point we might find out what happened with Zoja, but maybe not. And Carol's in a bit of a dilemma here, because what is she going to do next? Maybe once her and Paraguay guy meet up, they can find a way to convince the others or forge their own team and figure things out from there. There is a language barrier, so undoubtedly that'll be a challenge to overcome. But I'm going to wrap it up there, because otherwise I could just keep rambling forever, and this video is already plenty long enough. So with that, thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, consider giving it a like, pressing the hype button, which helps smaller channels out like myself, and subscribing to my channel for next week's Pluribus videos, but also upcoming film and TV reviews. It really does help me out and would mean a lot. I'll see you in the next one.